Unfortunately, in the first year of my sophomore year at the University of Arizona, I started to develop this cold that wouldn't go away, and it got worse and worse. And this is in the fall of '78, and by the spring of '79, I had nosebleeds that wouldn't stop, and then I had conjunctivitis that wouldn't go away, and they didn't know what it was. And by the summer, I was completely arthritic. I had systematic arthritis in my body. And then by the January, February of 1980, I was completely hospitalized. Could not stop coughing. Had lost my apartment. Had lost. Had left college. Was back living with my grandmother after the hospitalization. They found I had something called Wagner's granulomatosis. And people thought, this is going to bring you back to Christianity. Because there are no atheists in foxholes, as everybody says, right? Wrong. I found out the opposite. What I found out was that people helped me. Medical science helped me. No God was helping me when I was dying. There was no God helping me when I was in pain and relieving that pain. No, medical science did that. The variable was scientific treatment, not prayer. So through the force of the experience of both information and then actual experience with, life, made me think, atheism is a viable option. And what happened after that was I came back to the University of Arizona. I actually had to petition them to bring me back. And all the languages that I studied in high school, the Hebrew, the Greek, I said, okay, to make up time, what I'm going to do is go to a professor and say, can you give me your final exam in Greek and give me a year's credit of Greek? He says, well, no one's done that. But if you pass the final exam in Greek, yes, I'll give you a full year's coursework credit in Greek. So I went, took the final exam, and passed. I said, would you do that for second year Greek? He says, well, no one's done it for second year Greek, but if you pass the final exam, it's it. So I went and did it in Greek, second year Greek. Then I went to do it in biology. I did it in German. I did it in a few other subjects. So the first semester back, I took 45 credits, and graduated my sophomore, junior, and senior year in 3 semesters. And one of the places was Hebrew. And I went to the professor in Hebrew, and I said, would you give me your final exam in Hebrew? And if I pass it, would you give me a year Hebrew? Just like the same tactic. Well, if you do it, I passed it. On the basis of what I had studied on my own, never took Hebrew formally. And those professors started saying, you should be over at Harvard, because that's where the primary biblical scholars are. At that time, they had 2, Frank Cross and John Stricknell, who were original members of the Dead Sea Scrolls team, and that's with whom I studied. And so that's been my experience. It's the information that I gathered already on my own and then later is what made me shift and say, there is no real evidence for almost anything that I had thought and believed was true. Yes? Well, the answer is from the patient's viewpoint, yes. At the time, I believed it. Later, from looking back, I say no. What happens is a lot of people will report being healed even though their symptoms don't go away for a variety of reasons. A lot of people will misinterpret what they have. For example, they may have a backache and they say, I have a kidney problem. Backache equals kidney problem. So you pray for them. Their backache goes away. They say, the kidney problem went away. See? So you healed me of a kidney problem. Other people will not say they're still not healed, or even though their symptoms persist, they will say I'm healed because they don't want to insult God. Or they will say, if I say I'm not healed, that itself might curse me, to a longer healing process. So I learned that there are a variety of reasons why people will report being healed when they're not. And so every single healing that I can remember being attributed through my prayers, because people never said, you heal me, but God heals through you. I can always explain very naturalistic. Yeah, it was gradual. It was, finding this argument. First of all, it's not really what this scholar is presenting it as, and then I can make the same argument for the Muslim case, or for the Hindu case. So almost any argument, I could just plug in Krishna or plug in Allah, and I could make the same argument. So how do I know which one is true? And yes, I'm an evidentialist, which means my primary principle is I don't accept anything as true without evidence. And I have a very specific definition of that in the book. I am a presuppositional positivist, as opposed to just a classical positivist. In other words, I start with a presupposition that if you believe your senses, your five senses, are giving you reliable data, and if you believe that logic is giving you reliable data, then I make three categories of knowledge, belief, and reasonable belief and unreasonable belief. So knowledge, to me, I only use that word for things that I can empirically verify with my senses and logic. Like this table is here, I know that. Belief is everything else that is not subject to my direct verification. And then there are two types of belief to me. Reasonable, which is based, even though you've never seen something happen, it's based on known phenomena that you can verify happen. Unreasonable beliefs are those based on things that no one has ever seen happen, cannot verify that happen. Well, it depends on what you mean by religion. I define religion as a set of beliefs that presupposes a relationship with a supernatural force or being. And if you say, does that have any evidentiary value? I'd say no. There's no evidence that such an entity exists. If you say, does it have emotional value? In other words, are people comforted by it? I say, well, maybe, yeah. Some people are maybe comforted by the belief that there's something that's there when it's not. But then that devolves into an ethical question of whether it's ever ethical to feel good about things that is not true. For example, if you have a child that feels good because they believe Santa Claus is coming, and then they act good because they believe that Santa Claus is not going to bring them gifts, is it ever ethical to have people act well because of a false belief? And so that's a different kind of question. The ethics of belief is a different question from, it depends on what you mean by value in that way. Well, usually it's just face value. In other words, is it possible that a human being named Jesus existed? And yeah, it's possible that a human being named Jesus existed. So I have no problem with saying there probably was a guy named Jesus, because I know that human existence is a known phenomenon. A person named Jesus is a known phenomenon. I have no problem with somebody, but right, beyond that, to say he did anything that's reported in the Gospels, there's no independent evidence, of it. And you can build 10 different Jesuses on the basis of what in the Gospels. As I was talking about last night with Daryl. You can build a revolutionary Jesus on the same data. You can build a prophet on the same data. You can build a cynic Jesus on the same data. There's all kinds of Jesuses you can. But the problem remains, all our data comes from the 3rd century. Really mostly from the 3rd and 4th. So, well, see, all the evidence from Peter and Paul also comes from the same manuscript from the 3rd and 4th. So we're in the same boat with them. We know something happened, that this belief system grew, but by the time it got to the point where it's being recorded, it's the 3rd and 4th century. And the second thing that happened is they didn't seem to be convincing too many people at the beginning. Even if you read the New Testament, they're saying, we're not convincing, the Jews don't believe us. We got to go to the Gentiles because they don't believe us.